my fellow weirdlings. It's Margot, and today I'm bringing you a really creepy, true haunted house story that another YouTube creator sent to me. If you're ready to get spooked and spine tingled, keep watching. Amanda from the Vardo Dark channel was kind enough to share her family story with us. The Vardo Dark is a new channel from Amanda and her husband Adam, where Amanda tells you an original horror story while drawing a sketch every week. I've been watching and it's really fun and spooky. I'll leave their channel link in the comments and the description box if you want to go show them some love. Amanda says, so the house was built in 1900, but we bought it from a flipper, so it's this really weird place that's very old but seems brand new because he completely remodeled it. We've lived here for over 3 years. The only thing the flipper told us regarding the history was that he bought it at an auction and it had been empty for 6 years. He said it was so strange because it was fully furnished, even food still left in the fridge, as if the last people had just got up and left one day and never came back. It would be almost a year before we started learning the history of the house, but odd things happened right away. Just the usual things you sort of expect with a super old house at first. Seeing things out of the corner of the eye, things falling off the walls, hearing creaking upstairs when no one was up there. My daughter would say that things would fall off her shelves at night. Once, she said she was working on a puzzle sort of late at night and got down to the last 2 pieces, but they were missing, which made her super upset. She said she basically turned her room upside down looking for the pieces and was crying. She finally gave up and went to bed. The following morning, the 2 pieces were placed right by the puzzle as if put there for her to find. One thing that was actually kind of neat was that we'd occasionally smell cigarette smoke, but it would always be accompanied by this sense of well-being. And it was always when someone was upset. Only the upset person would smell it at the time, even if the whole family was in the room. For instance, it was extremely windy one night, and my husband was away for work. I felt very worried and scared about the weather. Then I suddenly smelled the strong cigarette smell, so strong it was like someone was in the room smoking, and I felt like I was being hugged and comforted and felt totally better. So right away we liked our ghost. But other stuff began happening that I didn't really associate with the history of the house until later, when I found out about it. For one thing, my daughter and I kept getting stomach viruses after we first moved in, which wasn't typical. We adopted a dog from the animal shelter, and it viciously attacked my daughter and I 4 days after being in our home, and I had to physically fight it off of us. One time while not at home, my brakes failed and my daughter and I ran a red light into a busy intersection, but amazingly avoided any harm to anybody. During the summer at a Little League baseball game, a pop fly came flying at my face while I was sitting in the rear of an SUV. I had nowhere to go to get out of the way, and tucked myself into a ball, knowing I was going to get cracked with this thing. But my husband managed to pull the hatch down over me and it shattered the window instead, covering me in glass. Still scary, but I could have been killed if the ball hit me, so I was very grateful. Then one night a car ran into our house, hitting the wall that my husband and I were sleeping behind. It broke the siding, broke the studs, cracked the drywall, and bent the baseboards, but somehow just stopped before coming through, and undoubtedly killing or at least greatly harming us. The last really alarming, strange thing that happened before we found out about the house was early in the morning before Christmas that year. I'd gotten up with my husband and seen him off to work, but hadn't woken my kids yet. All of a sudden, I had that overwhelming feeling that I was going to get sick and ran to the bathroom. It just came out of nowhere. But after a few minutes, I didn't get sick. It was one of those things I knew that I would eventually, even though I felt slightly better at the moment. So I decided to go to our other bathroom because it was bigger, and I was just going to take pillows and curl up on the floor by the toilet. After a while of doing that, I started to feel better and decided to get up because I needed to get my kids up. But when I sat up, I fainted. Then, when I came to and tried to sit up again, I fainted again. It happened 3 times, and then I felt like I couldn't sit up at all. All I could do was scream for my son until he heard me and called my husband to come back home. I ended up never getting sick, and I just spent the day in bed, but was otherwise fine after that. Well, not long after that, I posted on Facebook about the cigarette smell that goes with the wonderful, comforting feeling, and that I believed this was a spirit. Let me tell you, this post opened the floodgate. People began messaging me who knew some of the history of my house, and little by little I began to learn things. Eventually, word got around to an elderly man who was the brother of a person who died in my house, a man who had been a heavy smoker. The surviving brother had heard about my Facebook post, and he showed up at our door. He told me that his brother Norman had died here in the 90s from a brain aneurysm. He was a middle-aged man at the time. I'd actually already heard about Norman by then, and all accounts described him as an absolutely wonderful man. He died in my daughter's room, where her puzzle pieces had been kindly found for her. Norman's wife, Janet, died not long after Norman. She had developed an addiction to pain medication and died of an overdose in the bathroom where I had experienced my extremely weird episode of repeatedly fainting and feeling sick. When I learned that, I absolutely believed that Janet had simply wanted me to know what happened to her. Norman's brother also told us that prior to Norman owning the house in the 70s, there had been a rather serious house fire, which had killed a child. But he didn't know many details on that, or where the poor child's bedroom had been. But we think that is why things sometimes fall in my daughter's room, or I hear footsteps in my son's room when no one else is home but me. We think the child wants to play with them or their things, which of course we are happy to share. The brother told us that Norman adored this house. When we showed him around, he thanked us for taking such great care of it, and that he hoped we stayed here for a long time, because he just thought Norman would really like us, and we agree because Norman is very kind. However, I began to think of all the scary incidents that transpired after we moved in. Also, once the pandemic struck, the house became very active, probably because the family as a whole was so anxious and on edge, and the energy of the whole world was nuts. But sometimes the things I feel here don't feel nice, and they don't feel like Norman. One night, I woke to my dog laying on top of me and growling into the air. I got up to bring her out, and she snarled the whole way through the house, which was uncharacteristic of her. As soon as we entered the living room, where the door to let her out was, I was full of dread. I felt hate emanating in that room. My dog was barking and snarling, and actually didn't even want to go out because she didn't want to leave me. But I made her go out, and I stood with my back to the wall. I just somehow knew there was someone over by my bookshelves, the angry, hateful thing. I couldn't see anything, but I just knew that's where it was. Another night I was sleeping in the living room, and my desk was in front of the bookshelves. I was laying on the couch in the dark, reading on my phone, when I suddenly felt that bone-chilling hate again, and my desk chair began to swivel in the dark. I didn't really know what to do, so I ignored it. When you look at the street view of my house, you'll see an old picture of it. It was long before we ever lived there. Interestingly enough, we live on a corner, and when you toggle the street view around the corner, it changes from a bright sunny day to a cloudy day, and it switches to an even older view of the house. But in both views of the house, there are a decent amount of trees in the yard, both front and back. Well, by the time we bought the house, there were no trees. 0. They all died. If you look at the rear of our property, there's even an old dead one on one corner. But on the other corner, that's shared with a neighbor, there's a tree, which is on his property, and it's fine. No other trees in the neighborhood have been affected, only our yard. I believe there is something bad in this house, but I also believe that the residents who've unfortunately been harmed from it remain, and that they protect us. I mean, when have you ever heard of a car breaking through a wall, but being stopped by a baseboard, a flimsy piece of wood? When have you heard of running a light and brakes failing in a metropolitan area and coming through that unscathed? Just so many fairly terrible accidents miraculously avoided. And trees that can't survive on our property, so weird. I wish there was a way to trace the history before the 70s, but my trail is basically gone cold. In the last 2 weeks, I've started catching a glimpse of a man when I pull into the garage after taking the kids to school. Only at that time, no other time, and he's outside on the front walk, right in front of the spot where the car hit. I see him out of the corner of my eye, and then when I turn my face to him, he's gone. He's not Norman, and he scares me, but I trust that Norman won't let him inside. Hopefully the Vardo Dark will keep us updated on any new activity in their home. That's all I have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed this story and will come back for more. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, and bring your friends, family, COVID pod, cult members, invisible friends, or enemies. And if you have a story you'd like for me to share, please send it my way. Thanks so much for watching.